السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Can everybody hear me?
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. Yes.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. Okay, so it says باب الحيض. I believe we're here. أخبرنا علي بن خشرم أن إسماعيل بن علية أخبرهم عن أيوب أي السختياني عن أبي قلابة عن معاذة العدوية قالت سألت امرأة عائشة رضي الله عنها أتقضي الحائض الصلاة؟ فقالت أحرورية أنت؟ قال كنا نحيض عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فلا نقضي ولا نؤمر بالقضاء. Right. So why do you, I believe we had this discussion last week, but why do you think, did we have this discussion last week? Maybe we didn't. But why do you think she does not have to do qada? If you compare it to fasting, why is it that she does qada of her fast but doesn't do qada of her prayers? Let's think about
Salah is mandated every day.
say it again, Zafar.
Salah is mandated every day, whereas Ramadan is specified for a specific month.
So level of difficulty, good. So specifically, what's the
Level of difficulties harder.
good? Ammar is mentioning so levels of difficulty. So specifically, what variable are you talking about? Is it how hard it is or how frequent it is?
Frequency.
How frequent it is.
And does that apply to all women, or is it specific to some women? Specific to some. So the issue of if you asked her to do qada, if you asked her to do qada of her prayers every month, that would be specific to just some women. Would it apply to all women? Okay. So, but is it an exception, or is it a common difficulty? Is it something that's rare that applies to just a few select people who have a particular difficult situation right now, or is it in general, it applies to women in general?
General.
So we have it's a difficulty. It is widespread, okay, and it is repetitive, right? And so we see in the Sharia again and again and again. We're going to come along and we're going to treat the haja. Here's a haja. Okay, you have to pray a week's worth of prayers. How long is it going to take you, sister? Okay, let's do it quickly. Let's do, for example, a day in half an hour. Okay, that's pretty fast. No, you can do it. You can do it in that time, right? You could pray dhuhr in, just do qada of dhuhr in like 3 minutes. 15 minutes, okay. So 15 minutes, you ask me to do 15 minutes times, let's say 10 days. Okay, 150 minutes is what? It's like 3 hours, right? Just under 3 hours. 2.5 hours. It's not super difficult, right? So why is this useful? Because I'm trying to get a taste. I'm trying to get a taste of difficulty that is treated as if it was duress. How do I know this is difficulty is treated as duress? Because the Sharia has changed. So if I'm fasting, right? A woman fasting is a pain in the neck, right? Like it'd be so much easier if she could just fast with everyone else. You're in the spirit of Ramadan. Everyone else is fasting. Now it's like, oh man, I have to fast by myself at a random day, and it's hard, you know? It's much harder. So there is difficulty in doing qada of Ramadan outside, doing later. It would be easy if you just didn't have to do it. But look at the difference, right? The difficulty of, oh, I have to fast by myself on my own schedule without the kind of encouragement of other people necessarily, without the Ramadan vibe. It's not a big deal, right? Similarly, asking a sister once a week to spend 2.5 hours praying, it's not really that much. It's not such a big deal. But yet the Sharia has considered it big enough that it's overlooked, that you don't have to do it, right? So that's in terms of right? Similarly, the maslaha, the benefit, right, of a kafir, when a kafir becomes Muslim, according to the Hanafis, why would he do qada? He doesn't have to do qada because he wasn't obliged to pray anyway. According to the Jumhur, he was obliged to pray. He was just missing the prayers. So, why doesn't he do qada? We say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it easy for him, made it as an encouragement, right? As an encouragement, he doesn't have to do it. So that's a maslaha that's been treated as a darura, right? To make it easy for people to become Muslim, the Sharia has changed, not according to Hanafis, but according to the Jumhur, the Sharia has looked at this maslaha, the benefit of making it easier for somebody to become Muslim, as a like a darura, and has relieved him of the obligation of having to do qada. Right? So this is useful because tomorrow, when I'm doing fatwa, and I now need to judge, is this haja that I'm looking at, is it like a darura, or is it just a difficulty and you just have to deal with it? So I'm looking at a lot of different things, but particularly I'm looking at how widespread it is and how difficult it is and how recurrent it is. Widespread and recurrent, the same concept, right? And so I'm looking at this issue, and I'm trying to say, is this something? So if it's specific to Ammar, I'm sorry, he has to deal with it. That's something unique to Ammar. He has a particular problem, and nadir la hukma lahu. It's very tricky in his situation. But when it becomes something that is widespread, applies to all people or large groups of people, right? And it's recurrent. And we're going to start looking at this difficulty as if it was a darura. Does that make sense? But the issue
Yes.
is basically making enough strong analogies, right? And looking at what's going on. Even in terms of mafsada, is there a mafsada in not doing qada? It's a huge mafsada. He didn't pray, right? So often we might overlook things that lead to mafasid. For example, the benefit or need of having a credit card at the cost of not having a credit card and paying interest, but at the cost of having a credit card without paying interest. So you have agreed to do something haram without doing the haram, right? Or it's like something like touching a woman with gloves on, or touching a woman without gloves on, right? But it's not zina itself, you know. There's a need or something that's very, very close to it, or a small darura or convenience, and this has allowed this thing, but it's not zina itself. So we also, when we look at the thing that it's going to allow, we have to think how significant that is. Did it allow me to do a contract that is vague, or did it allow me to take someone else's property? There's a big difference. Because a contract that is vague, for example, is forbidden because it may lead to taking people's property, right? So there's lots of things in the Sharia which are haram, but saddan lidhara'i, because they lead to something else. Those kind of things will often be knocked off much easier. Like, it's okay. Something that is haram, not in and of itself, right? It's much easier for that thing to become halal. The pressure that I need, the kind of haja that I need, the kind of darura that I need, is much less than something that is like not praying to begin with, or committing zina, right? Or eating pork or something like that, right? There's a big difference, right? Does that make sense? So let's say, for example, right, faradan, if I said it was haram to eat in a restaurant, that it was that in which there was pork, right? I might make it halal for a need because I'm not saying that you're eating pork. I'm saying you're eating in a restaurant in which there's pork or there's alcohol, right? I'm not saying that it is haram to eat in a place like that, but I'm saying if we said that, because that would be forbidden because it leads to something or because it may lead to something. Does that make sense? Or I say it's forbidden to be in a mixed school, right? Teenagers can't be in a mixed school. It's haram because it leads to the haram. The need that would allow me to make that halal, like this kid has no other school to go to, you know, or the other schools are really violent, or they're really like this, or they're really like that, whatever it is. The what could push me to allow that would be much less than saying, oh, is he allowed to have a girlfriend? Is he allowed to commit zina? You know? So for example, zina would never become halal. Like even if this guy said, "Oh, I'm gonna go insane if I don't commit zina," like it's still haram. You know what I'm saying? There's certain things like, "Oh, if I don't kill this guy, I'll leave Islam." So it's more important that I stay Muslim than he stays alive. No, it's not. Like you can't take life, period. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So every single time we see these things, we're trying to pick up on the prophetic way of dealing with haja, darura. What kind of haja, what kind of darura, what kind of hukum, how is it changing, right? And it's quite a tricky thing. So it's not easy at all. Right? And that's why we disagree. قالت حرو go ahead عمر.
Isn't strictly a fiqh question, but I'm wondering, like, what does this hadith tell us about the political situation at the time, given that oh my gosh, I can't speak, subhanAllah. Aharuriyatun and like that question.
Yeah, are you basically so yeah, so these people are there around. Like are you one of those ISIS girls or what? That's what she's saying. Right? Haruriya, these are Khawarij. So you're like, are you part of this ISIS group or something? I mean, are you an extremist? So yeah, 100%. So for the first, um, they're always going to be around, but basically in that Umayyad period, um, in that Umayyad period, so Aisha's at the beginning of the Umayyad period. It's going to continue for another 80 years. There is going to be these three groups or four groups. You're going to have Ahl Sunnah, political. I'm talking about politically here, because religiously it's a bit difficult to organize it like that. So the Shia, is that a political group or is that a religious group? It's kind of somewhere in between. Um, Khawarij is a religious and political group. So you have the Khawarij, you have the Shia, you have Ahl Sunnah, and then you have the Zubayrids, right? So until those, I don't know when exactly. Somebody can look it up when Abdullah Zubayr is crucified. May Allah yarhamu, radiallahu anhu. You know, that was also another rebellion in Mecca. So there was lots of rebellion, yeah, and these kind of issues. But certainly the Haruriyya is exactly ISIS, right? Continually, multiple different groups of extremists who genuinely believe that if you're not part of our group, you're not a Muslim, and we should fight you. And there's also their poetry. I think we'll in the Jamhara we might study some of their poetry later on. Okay. أحرورية أنت قد كنا نحيض عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فلا نقضي ولا نؤمر بالقضاء. حدثنا محمد بن يحيى وأحمد بن يوسف قال حدثنا عبد الرزاق الصنعاني قال أخبرنا سفيان عن الأعمش. I think we had this discussion last week, didn't we? Does Sufyan narrate from Al-A'mash? Sufyan al-Thawri does he narrate from A'mash? I'm pretty sure this is Sufyan ibn Uyayna. So Abdul Razzaq Sana'ani is the same kind of time as Imam Shafi'i. Sufyan ibn Uyayna is the teacher of Imam Shafi'i. So that would kind of make sense, that kind of time, right? And Al-A'mash is the same kind of time as Imam Abu Hanifa. And Sufyan al-Thawri is a little bit younger than Imam Abu Hanifa. So it would make sense that this is Sufyan ibn Uyayna and this is Al-A'mash. Wallahu a'lam. I don't know if Abdul Razzaq San'ani narrates from Iraqiyin. Not sure. So I'm pretty sure this is Sufyan ibn Uyayna. عن ثابت بن عبيد عن القاسم بن محمد, right? Who's Qasim ibn Muhammad? I know Adib knows, but go ahead, Zafar.
One of the seven.
One of the
One of the
seven.
seven.
And he is the grandson of
Asma.
Asma bint Umais, who's her husband? Sayyidina Abu Bakr,
Abu Bakr.
right? So he is so Imam Malik will study with his son. So Imam Malik will narrate from Abdul Rahman ibn Qasim ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, right? So this Qasim, he is basically the grandson of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, basically the grandson of Sayyidina Ali, because Sayyidina Ali raised his father, and the kind of the son of Aisha, or the relative, because he was raised by Aisha as well. So Qasim was raised by Aisha. So you can imagine this person has a lot of insight into fiqh, of course. قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ناوليني الخمرة, pass me this sajjada. Here we go. Sajjada tunsaj min sa'f. Pass me the sajjada. وهي حائض, while she was praying. قالت إني حائض, i.e. I can't go into the masjid and give you this thing. قال إنها ليست بيدك, it's not in your hand, meaning if you stand outside of the masjid and hand it into me, then it's not going to be, you're not going to be inside the masjid, right? So this is an indirect proof that a woman cannot be inside the masjid when she's on a period, right? So she's saying, I can't, like, why can't you do that? Right? And he's mentioning that she's on her period. So so she said, I can't go and give it to you because I'm on my period, and because a woman on her period cannot enter the masjid. That's the implied, right? Is it explicitly stated? It's not explicitly stated, but that's what's understood. Okay. حدثنا ابن المقرئ قال حدثنا سفيان. Definitely Sufyan ibn Uyayna here. How do I know that now? How do I know this is definitely not Sufyan al-Thawri?
From where he comes in the chain.
Where it comes in the chain. So is it possible that somebody like our author would have just one person between him and Sufyan al-Thawri? No, not possible. عن منصور بن عبد الرحمن عن أمه قالت, I'm not sure who these people are. سمعت عائشة تقول كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يضع رأسه في حجر إحدانا وهي حائض فيتلو القرآن. Right? He used to put his head on our lap, right? And while he was reciting Quran. So this tells us that it's not offensive in itself to recite Quran lying down, right? Aisha radiallahu anha, she used to do that. She said, I used to do my wird while lying down, right? So it's not offensive in itself. However, I would discourage many people from doing that. Why? Because, how do I explain it? If you have adab, you don't have to try and have adab. You know what I'm saying? It's just natural. But if you don't have adab, you have to try and have adab. So if you can imagine you are Aisha radiallahu anha, and you're like going to sleep or lying down after Fajr and doing your wird while lying in bed, she's on a totally different planet. So I'm not trying to say that we have to have a different deen because we're not like them. That's not a very good thing to say. But basically, we have to put certain scaffolding in our lives in order to preserve adab. If you have adab, it's fine. But for many people, you know, it's interesting the word attitude in English, right? It means a way that you stand, right? This is attitude, or a way that you sit. This is attitude. It's also your attitude, right? So, you just gotta be careful, basically, you know. So there's a lot of like outward things that we do that help us, like psychologically and spiritually, remember the adab that we're supposed to have, you know. So someone who's like, you know what, yeah, I don't stand up for my teacher because not sunnah. It's like it's fine. Like I wouldn't like my students to stand up for me, you know. It's like I just find it weird, like particularly because I'm not actually a sheikh. You know, I'm not actually something like it. But if I was, I'd be like, bro, stand up because not because of me, but of who I am, right? But I'm not. So it's like, you know, but that could be dangerous for the student because the student thinks, oh yeah, it's cool, I can just be rude, you know? And you'll see a lot of that, particularly Western students, like a lot of them that just like have bad adab, you know? And because the sheikh is trying to be chill, the sheikh is being like, don't worry about it. But the sheikh is not helping the person, right? So I saw that, for example, with like Sheikh Ali Hani, one of my teachers. He's extremely, extremely humble, and he's like extremely deep adab. Like you couldn't take adab away from him, you know. And so, but the way he would let people treat him didn't help them because you know, he's like a super super scholar, and then he wouldn't demand any physical or outward adab, and people would kind of like, you know, wouldn't benefit from that. Allahu alam. So you know, so I'm totally like Mauritanian style. You know, the Mauritanian style, like, yeah, it's chill. Like that. That's how I honestly believe that's how the Prophet ﷺ was. Like there wasn't a lot of kind of like Indo-Pak slash Shami kind of like, oh, this is the adab and you have to do this, and the teacher said that and you have to do it. It's like it's not like that. It's pretty chill. But particularly for a Western, that's quite harmful because you just don't have adab to begin with. Like you're just rude by default because you're Western, you know. And so I wouldn't advise people to do that, you know. So do it if you can do that with qimmat al-adab, right? But most people can't. Does that make sense? So basically, if I phrase it another way, you can abandon adab if you have adab, but if you don't have adab, then you have to do takalluf of adab until you have adab. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. The other thing then is there is a semi-proof in it that you can recite Quran on your period. Because the Prophet is almost like she's saying the Prophet ﷺ was right next to the place where there is blood from a period, and even that didn't stop him, right? You could argue there's a proof that you can recite Quran on your period, right? However, Ibn Taqiq al-Eid and others, you know, there's a proof that you cannot recite because look, she's saying, look, you know, notice how there's an illah, there's a reason to not menstruate, to not to recite Quran, which is that I was menstruating, and that didn't stop him. So, i.e., she's saying even though I couldn't recite Quran, he did, right? So the position of the Jumhur, right, is that you cannot recite Quran on one's period, right? So again here, if you see like the Maliki school, you see the issue, right, that they're going to weigh up. Like the Malikis, they say a woman on her period can recite, and a woman on her in Janaba cannot recite, right? So look at how long one lasts, one doesn't last. One can be removed, the other can't. The harm, what would happen to society, right? And now you're a mufti, you're the Grand Mufti of Pakistan, right? And the societal changes in Pakistan. And now you're like, you know what? I think the fatwa we should give is that women can recite Quran on a period, right? So you're looking at the pros and the cons, and you are weighing up the masalih and the mafasid, and you're looking at, okay, the harm of reciting the Quran on a period, the benefit of it, given now modern day Pakistan. So you're not saying individuals in Pakistan, you're saying modern day Pakistan, a recurrent theme now that is different to 100 years ago, right? And your fatwa might change, or your irshad may change. Even like myself, just like how I'm gonna give you advice may change, right? What people are doing. I'll give you one example is an issue of music, right? For many people, music is like the only is like a drug, in a good sense and a bad sense. So when you take that drug away from them, that's good, right? Because they shouldn't be on drugs. But it's bad because they're going to go into another drug, you know? So here's this teenager who's like depressed, and you're like, oh yeah, music's haram. It's actually, it's like, well, if you go and look at these people, look at their lives, it's very, very different to talking about things in general. You know what I'm saying? And then it's not just one teenager. Hey, it's like this is like this life, And this is one, it's very important to see situations that you're going to give fatwa in, right? So again, like last week, was it, or week before, I was in SF in San Francisco, and it's really bad. Like I'm not talking about the people on the street, but just like like just look at people's faces. Like it's really bad. Um, so I don't know what it's like in, for example, Manchester, but London is also like really bad. Like people are really miserable, right? So that's a factor that the Sharia doesn't change because you live in London or because you're miserable, right? But when you get a widespread system, like suddenly it's like, oh, it's quite a different picture, right? It's quite a different picture. So that's part of the discussion. It doesn't have to be the discussion, but it is part of the discussion, right? When I'm making this judgment, because you are literally, sounds kind of funny when you listen to these maqasid people who are like, oh, the Sharia is based on masalih and mafas and da da da. But it is actually like when you get into fiqh, that's actually what's happening. It's like a balance, and you're playing this game half of the time. But you also have to be careful. There's situations where the Prophet ﷺ did not recognize difficulty, said, hey, deal with it, right? There's situations like that. So it's not every difficulty is treated as if it's a darura. So it's quite a tricky thing to do. Allahu A'lam. And that's why we should have husn al-dhan, of muftis who give fatwa that sound a bit funny sometimes, or they sound a bit too lax. It's like, well, that's his opinion. I can see where that's coming from. That's not what majority of scholars would say, though, right? So you'd istishara of various different muftis and get an idea, and you realize, yeah, most scholars do not say that. So, okay, alhamdulillah. But there is a basis for what they're saying, not just crazy, right? Allahu a'lam. But sometimes it is crazy. Okay. حدثنا علي بن خشرم قال حدثنا وكيع عن هشام بن عروة عن أبيه عن عائشة قالت كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يدني إلي رأسه وهو مجاور فأغسله. What's مجاور here? معتكف. فأغسله وأرجله وأنا في حجرتي وأنا حائض وهو في المسجد. Right? So the question is, why didn't she go to the masjid then? So if a woman can be in the masjid on her period, why didn't she go into the masjid to go and do that for him? Right? I think that's quite a good proof, isn't it? Makes sense to me. It doesn't seem ridiculous. So I mean, I remember this particular situation we had. I was working with an organization, and there was a need for sisters to regularly be in the masjid because there was no other place for them to use. Right? So it was difficult. There's a religious need, right, and a societal need for women to be in the masjid regularly, even on their period, because it's a need. So I remember discussing this with Sheikh Ahmed Hassanat, And I said, look, there's positions. Ibn Hazm says a woman can be on her period in the masjid, da 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 da. And there's some evidence in the Shafi school on that issue as well. Can we follow this position? And he said no. So his judgment was it's better to stick to the former madhahib. It's better to cancel those educational slash religious activities or do them in some other way that isn't very convenient and not very effective than have women in the masjid on their period. Right? That was his estimation. Right? Wallahu a'lam. Does that make sense? And somebody might 100% disagree. They say, are you insane? You're talking about in California, where Islam is very weak and people need Islamic schools and people need religious activities. And now you're telling sisters don't come to the masjid on their period, even though Ibn Hazm allowed it and Ibn Hazm is a mujtahid. Somebody might like, oh, you guys are totally insane. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right.
Some scholars allow it, but just don't allow them to enter the prayer place.
Yeah, that's different. So the prayer place is going to be is not really a masjid then, right? But I'm talking about if fiqh-wise, if this is actually a masjid,
Yeah.
should we bend those rules or not? Let's say for example the mafsada of stepping out of the form of the ahib is just very dangerous. So Ibn Hazm also says you can eat you can listen to music is fine, right? And he also says that what's it called? Pig fat is halal because pork. So his issue is pig meat, not pig fat, right? So will you eat pig fat as well? Because there's a benefit in that as well. Hispanic food, again in Latino food in here in again California, they have a lot of pig fat. Fry things like fried beans and pig fat. So there's a need for that as well, you know? So it's a very slippery slope. It's a very slippery slope. So everybody is judging, there's like kids standing at the bank of a river and there's a slippery slope next to the river and it's wet and it's raining. And there's cows or construction on one side and the slippery slope to the river. Like, how far should we push the kids? How far should we move them? It's difficult. If you don't move them, they could get hurt by the cows or hurt by the construction. If you push them and one bumps into the other, they will fall into the river, right? And so what's wrong is to not be cognizant of the fact that there's danger on either side, right? That's wrong. Like you'd be like, oh, there's no need for that. There is a need, right? There is genuinely a need. You know, you've seen situations when you tell people, when you're dealing with, let's say, hardcore Deobandis or hardcore, Salafis, and it's like the deen is one way, and it's like such a relief when you're like, hey, Habibi, there's more than one way the deen can be applied. Alhamdulillah. Oh, thank you, right? That's great, just that leaves like, alhamdulillah, this form of that, it's a huge relief. And there's other situations where, uh, you could argue that even with going outside the form of their hip, it would like take a lot of pressure off people and it would solve something. It's also extremely dangerous. Right? We'll see that in a second, actually. Um, so it's very tricky. It's very tricky. It's not easy at all. So anybody who looks at like, oh, it's just easy, these people are crazy. That's not fair, right? That's not really fair. Wallahu a'lam. Gender interaction, right? So you're like, oh no, we should be strict. Like I'm very strict about gender interaction. Um, Arguably to a fault, right? But like, well, you could achieve all this benefit. You can give da'wah. You can help all these sisters. You can do this. You can do that. It's like, I just, my estimation is there's more harm than benefit. That's my estimation. Somebody would come to me and say, complete disagree, 100% disagree. you know. But it's a tricky. It's not easy to make that judgment at all. And not every situation is the same either. England is not like America. Europe is not like America, right? Different places in Europe are not the same. Southeast Asia is very different. Gender interaction in Southeast Asia is very different to gender interaction in Europe, England, America. It's not the same. So you can't really say gender interaction. It's not one thing. Allahu a'lam. Okay, so حدثنا ابن المقرئ قال حدثنا به سفيان مرة أخرى عن أيوب. Oh, so it's the same hadith, is it? No, because when he says مرة أخرى. I'm lost. What's happening here? Why is he saying مرة أخرى? I'm not sure what's going on here. Atiyya. Have we seen anything from Atiyya so far? Is Atiyya there? I'm not sure what's going on here. I'm not sure. عن أيوب أي السختياني عن ابن سيرين عن عطية رضي الله عنها قال ذكر لها فقالت سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول أخرجوا العواتق وذوات الخدور يشهدون العيد ودعوة المسلمين ولتجتنب بالحيض مصلى المسلمين. Right. So the default here is that this is going out, right? The Eid is being prayed outside in an open area. So it says, take them out, the old ladies, al-awatiq, right? Have the old ladies and the young girls come and see the Eid prayer, and let them be present, yashhaduna. Let them be present, and the Muslims are making the dua, right? That's what I have as well. حدثنا به سفيان. So I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know. So it says Ibn Muqri, it says Sufyan narrated it to us another time. So what's it? Where's the previous hadith from Ibn Muqri? So maybe this hadith had it. I don't know. There's only one previous hadith from Sufyan. So maybe it's like this. It's like, Ibn Muqri said that Sufyan said, and then one hadith, and then Ibn Muqri said that Sufyan said, and then another hadith. Something like that. I don't know. I'm not sure. Anyway, ذوات الخدور, so the young girls, the old girls and the young girls, right? let them be present at the Eid and the dua. وَلْتَجْتَنِبْ الْحُيَّضُ مُصَلَّى الْمُسْلِمِينَ. So the Musalla al-Muslimin, the default here is not even actually a masjid. It's just the area where the people are praying, that they shouldn't be there, right? So here, again, you come along and say, gender interaction is haram, and it leads to the zina of the eye at least, and so therefore it's haram, right? So well, here the Prophet ﷺ is telling, say, have the old ladies and the young ladies, right? Dhawat al-khudur, the young ladies, they should come, right? So is there a mafsada in young ladies coming to the musalla? Yes. Is there a maslaha? Yeah, they're part of the religious activity. That's good, right? And so somebody who comes along and says all gender interaction is haram because it leads to the haram, that doesn't make any sense, because that's clearly not what's happening. So the argument you have to make is these kind of people shouldn't be around these kind of people. That's the argument you have to make. Or women of this culture, men of this culture, right? You can't just say because men and women are attracted to each other, it is haram for them to ever be around each other, because that's a balance, that's a judgment that we see the Prophet on multiple occasions cancelling, right? So does that make sense? Like, you can't come along and say, any possible harm makes something sinful. That's not even true, right? Like who was it? Like Fadl ibn Abbas, right? The Prophet's cousin, right? Um, um, he's on Hajj, and this lady comes, and the Fadl starts looking at her, and she's looking at him. So he didn't say, okay, on the khutbatul of on Hajj, like, men and women, hear my words, I came on Hajj, and I saw the harm of men and women both being on Hajj, so now henceforth no women will ever come on Hajj. He didn't say that. He saw the harm. There was a man looking at a woman looking at a man. He just turned Fadl's face away, and that's it. That's it. He didn't ban it, right? So that's a case for looking at how you weighed up the pros and the cons, and a case of saying, hey, yeah, of course, people will be interested in people, and there's some harm, but there's also it doesn't necessarily lead to direct haram, and just avoid it. End of story. Who was it? Was it they asked Hassan al-Basri? I can't remember who it was. They said, yeah, when we're in this country, all the A'ajim, all these non-Muslim women, they walk around topless. He said, "Oh, just look away." He didn't say, "Oh yeah, you have to leave that country." You have to leave that country. He didn't say that. He said, "Yeah, just look away." So it's I'm saying this as somebody who's very strict. It's like I'm cognizant of the fact that there's evidence against my approach. You know what I'm saying? And that's important. Like, you have to know what's the two sides of the argument. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. And then here, as I mentioned, there was a kedalil, a semi-dalil, that a woman cannot be in a masjid, because it says ليجتنب الحيض مصلى المسلمين. حدثنا. Why is it not a dalil? Because the musalla is not actually a masjid anyway. That's just the place where the Muslims were praying, out in the open somewhere. So حدثنا محمد بن. So now, here's the same situation. Now you go fast forward, and you should say, should we ban women from coming to the Eid prayer? Right? In Oldham. You were in Oldham, right, Zafar?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think? Should women be banned from going to the masjid?
No.
So what's the pros and cons in Oldham? Majority Pakistani, right?
Yeah, I think it's a majority due to the cultural bias comes into it as well.
So okay, so here you're dealing with majority. So you're dealing with this group of sisters who are semi-Western, semi-Eastern,
Yeah.
semi-religious, semi-just cultural Muslims. Lots of very like, desi hijab style, where it's like this is really not hijab at all.
Yeah.
On Eid, is it inappropriate behavior? Do men check women out? Do women, of course, right?
Yeah.
But you come and say, oh yeah, women, women should not be in the masjid. So what's going to happen to, you know, a lot of sisters? Like, well, where else am I going to go? You know?
Yeah,
So
a lot of them do want to come to the masjid. They just because of what the scholars have said in the local community.
they
They
do want to
refrain.
come.
Yeah, they do want to come.
Yeah, and so there's a benefit in that. And so is there harm in the fact that like, oh, boy girl stuff happening and I remember like seeing stuff on Eid like, oh my God, what's going on, right? Um, but so there's benefit and harm, but for many people, particularly because they don't have deen outside the masjid, you know. So it's like, well, if I'm not welcome in the masjid, why am I going to go? Go to church or something like that, or go somewhere else. I don't care. So particularly in a non-Muslim country, it's very dangerous. So in Pakistan, you could do other things, You could have like a whole bunch of, in principle, in a Muslim country, you could like build like a huge female Muslim center and like make it really cool and it's like there's a fitness coach and there's a coffee shop and a clothes shop and it's just all for women and just like yeah, come and find out about Islam and have fun and whatever. Like you can do that easily in a Muslim country, right? And particularly if you have to put the effort into it, like actually like the government actually invests in it, right? It's quite easy. In a non-Muslim country, you can't do that. It's not going to happen. You don't have that kind of support. So, like I remember with my own mom, it was like she was like, I really, really want to go to Eid. I was like, okay. So like she was like the only woman in this Bengali restaurant. So she was downstairs and she was like the only woman. There's nobody else at all. The Bengali restaurant's empty. We prayed up in the men's bedroom basically, and she prayed downstairs. Like 'cause she just wanted to be part of something. Like there's actually nothing. Like it's like not a single Muslim woman that she could talk to in English. Zero, So it's like when you tell somebody, don't come, you know, that doesn't make much sense if you have nothing, you know. Whereas if you have something like there's no need whatsoever. Even in a world, even argue if you could argue, say TikTok. Well, you have TikTok, you've got Instagram. That's tons of religious stuff. It's not like you don't have the ability to find out about the deen, right? There's like infinite things on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. So you can just sit there for 5 hours listening to lectures and be like, hey, why do I even need to go to the masjid at all? You could argue that as well. So the point is not so easy. I don't know. And it's certainly wrong to say anything that could result in any harm means that it's sinful, right? And I get a feeling that you get a lot of this from some Deobandis and from Salafis, right? So the whole shirki thing is like using sadd al in a very bad way, right? This could lead to shirk, so therefore it is shirk or it is haram. It's like could is not it has to mean it has to be does or usually, not could, right? Um, the other day, again, I don't want to say anything bad about Giovanni's, but I was reading this thing about women's hair, and it was like if a woman she can only cut her hair if it is past her, almost just above, just at the end of her just above her tailbone, A, and B if it's difficult. So if it's not difficult to manage, she has to keep growing it, and if it's shorter than that, she cannot cut it. And what is the illah? The illah is it would be masculine to do that. If it was shorter than her hair was shorter than all the way down to her to her almost her tailbone, then that would be a masculine thing to do. And it's haram for women to do things that are masculine. It's like, is that, I don't know. Like I just find that it's kind of, it's almost laughable. Because like, how is that even masculine? And so you have these lot of things where the issue is in the context where that's masculine. Let's say when men have long hair and women have longer hair, and you have now shorter hair than men. That's something, but that's not, that's just there's a problem. Wallahu a'lam. Okay, then it says حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال حدثنا محمد بن يوسف قال حدثنا سفيان. This is Sufyan al-Thawri, I'm pretty sure. Is it? Yeah, because here this is Mansur. Not sure this is Mansur ibn Mu'tamir or ibn Dakwan, I'm not sure. And Ibrahim al-Nakha'i. So this is Ibrahim al-Nakha'i. Okay, so Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, Hamdan Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman, and then Imam Abu Hanifa. That's what Imam Abu Hanifa is. Right, so I'm pretty sure this is Sufyan al-Thawri. Allahu a'lam. Jazakum khair. Right, and a very Iraqi, and this is an Iraqi, an Iraqi chain, right? How the Al-Aswad is a key source for Aisha, right? So Iraqi Aisha hadith. عن عائشة قالت كنت إذا حضت أمر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأتزر فكان يباشرني. Who was in the Alfiya class? I can remember this word. This is now the what's it called? The mahak, the test. What was the issue here? It's on the pattern ifta'ala from izar. فأتزر.
There's a wow as a root letter.
Say it again.
There's a wow as the first root letter.
It was a hamza. Izar. So it should be at-taziru. At-taziru. So now we've merged the ta and the hamza. And in reality, that was wrong. So this is not correct Arabic. It should be at-taziru, not at-taziru. Right, so it should be, so afta'ilu, the fa is a hamza, should be at-taziru, that's it, at-taziru. We should not do idgham of the ta and the hamza. So the hamza does not become a ta and then merge with the ta. So it's not, becomes at, right? I know in English, British English, right, the silent ta is pronounced as a hamza, right? That's ala lughayya, right? On a base on a bad language of British English, right? but in Arabic it's not true, right? The hamza is not a ta, not the same category. So it's ataziru, not at-taziru, but it's narrated at-taziru. So this is like a common mistake that the muhaddithin have kind of like just confirmed, basically. Like one generation after another, narrating it in a way that's not actually correct Arabic. It is ataziru, right? So this is in Bukhari. Maybe somebody can see what when he says in Fath al-Bari. In Fath al-Bari, there's lots of mabahith lughawiyya, right? So maybe somebody can look this hadith up. كنت إذا حضت أمرني النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فأتزر فكان يباشرني. Right, I used to put on an izar and then he used to touch me. So we'll talk about this hadith next week, inshallah ta'ala. There's two things I'd like you to do. Number one, see what Ibn Hajar says in Fath al-Bari on this in terms of the lugha of at-taziru. That's number one. Number two, why, if you were Imam Malik, why would you not care about this hadith? So I'm not interested in the content. I'm just talking about the source. So Imam Malik is the student of Abdurrahman ibn Qasim ibn Muhammad. So your teacher's dad grew up in the house of Aisha and was raised by Aisha, basically. So do you think I care about some Iraqi coming telling me a hadith from another Iraqi that Aisha said? It's like, who, you know, it's like I'm gonna go and tell, you know, tell Zafar about Pakistani cuisine or about Oldham jokes. You know, it's like, Fareed, you're not even from here. You don't know anything about Pakistani culture. You don't know anything about Oldham. It's like, whatever. You know. So like I'm quoting, you know, imagine like I'm interviewing people in Chicago about life in Japan. So what's the point? I don't really care. It's not really interesting. It's just like whatever. So the way that the muhaddithin say is, oh, thiqa, thiqa, thiqa. But Imam Malik is here, right? Or here-ish. And he's studying with somebody who was raised by the student, the son of somebody who was raised by Aisha. I don't really care really what people say or they don't say. Oh, it's a reliable narrator. Like, who cares? You know, doesn't really matter. It's not really relevant. So we have to understand how disparate chains of transmission are, right? And sometimes when it becomes an actual conflict, right? Meaning, do we follow A or B? It's kind of a no-brainer for certain people which way they're going to go, or how they're going to quote unquote ignore certain hadith. Because you're like looking at it, it's like, what is that? You know, just like this hadith. Where was it before? You know, Waki', what was it? Waki' and Hisham ibn Urwa, right? So you're studying with Urwa ibn Zubayr, or you're studying with Hisham. You know Hisham's hadiths inside out, back to front. Don't come and tell me what Waki' said, you know, about Hisham. Like, I don't really care. It's not really relevant. Like I know these, I know the content, I know what kind of things these people say anyway. So I don't need your hadith. So this is very important to understand that, you know, the relative benefit of the 6 books to certain people. So for the Shafi'is, Hanbalis, fantastic, very useful. For the Malikis, Hanafis, it's not like a new revelation. It has benefit, but it has limited benefit. And it's very important to understand that, like to understand the utility of something and the limitations of the utility of that thing. Right? How useful is this? When does that use actually stop? Right? It's a pretty important discussion. Okay, and case in point, like here's a hadith, well, it's incorrect. That's not how you speak Arabic. Right? Okay, inshallah, we'll stop here. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.